Welcome to the Triple J Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Phil Rasmussen, and it's my pleasure to introduce to you today the guest for our show, head men's basketball coach at the University of Illinois, Chicago, Coach Robert Ehsan. Rob and I go way back, both of us growing up in the Northern California area in Sacramento, where Rob actually graduated from local high school Bella Vista, where he's a legendary alum, before he and I went on to become teammates at University of California, Davis, where we played basketball there together. And Rob moved on to a basketball coaching career that has now spanned nearly 20 years. And it's been an absolutely awesome opportunity for me to watch his journey, as he's been one of the fastest rising young coaches throughout the country. Spent time at storied programs and under legendary coaches. He spent time at Maryland, Stanford, UAB, Virginia Tech. And we're going to dig into his story and talk a little bit about what shaped him in his early life, some of our time together at UC Davis, as well as some of the things that he's excited about and has learned throughout his coaching career. And we are looking forward to more conversations with Rob to come, but I hope you all enjoy this episode with Rob and get a chance to get to know the man that is going to be heading up the University of Illinois Chicago and taking over that Flames program. So really excited that he joined us today, and hope you all enjoy the episode. Rob, welcome to the show, my friend.
Phil, thanks for having me. It's been a long time since you and I were training together, playing on the same court in college, which was obviously probably the greatest, one of the most coolest times I know of my life, probably yours as well. So it is kind of, crazy to say 19 years or 20 years later here, but glad to be here and glad to get a chance to see you and talk.
Likewise, buddy. I appreciate you taking the time. I know it's been an absolutely crazy period of time as you take over a new program and move the family. So, I want to start with congratulations on your new gig and taking over as head coach out in the beautiful and crazy city of Chicago, man.
The Windy City, yeah, super excited about the opportunity to be a head coach again. To also do it at a level, the Missouri Valley Conference, which is I think was ranked number 9 in the country last year in terms of the rankings, and to do it in a place like Chicago. I've been lucky and fortunate throughout my career to work at some great institutions, but also in some great locations. I think where I live is always, and where my family lives has always been an important thing when considering all job opportunities. And as you mentioned, I've been in some cool places: Maryland, the Washington, D.C. area, Birmingham, back in the Bay Area, and now in the Windy City of Chicago, one of the greatest cities in the world, and a huge sports town. Is a really, really cool opportunity for me and my family. So really excited to be here.
Let's start there. Really, as exciting as it is, there's a ton of work to be done. So would love to kind of hear you break down a little bit on how things are going as you step in and take over. When you take over a program, having to evaluate your current team and the roster, recruiting and rebuilding that roster, and dealing with the transfer portal, as we were talking before the show, and getting your staff together, establishing yourself within the university, getting the whole process of the culture getting in motion, and then obviously all the personal aspects of moving the family and settling in. So bring us up to speed. How's everything going on that front?
Yeah, I think it's complete chaos. It's been complete chaos. And as a coach, you got to, and especially a college basketball coach. And when I say the word chaos, some people, think as a negative connotation, but you have to embrace it. I mean, in today's day and age, to be able to coach and lead in 2024, one of the biggest characteristics I think of being successful is the ability to adapt. And just like many professions and many industries, college basketball, college athletics have changed drastically over the last few years. So taking over a new program, I did this in 2016 when I took over UAB. It was completely different, almost like a different job, completely different job industry, if you will, 8 years later, just because of all the changes. But putting together a new team, and especially doing somewhere far away. So all the logistics about family and getting our family moved and schools for the kids. There's all that. There's all the personal side of it. When you take on a new job like this, and there's no lag time when you get hired. I mean, shoot, even maybe a couple days before I was officially hired and the news broke, you are hitting the ground running full speed, building a team, getting to entrench yourself and meet, onboarding into the university, into the athletic department, hiring a new staff, in this situation, 7 new coaches, making sure their families and they are can onboard and move here and all this stuff. So it's been awesome, but it has been completely chaotic, which we've embraced. And yeah, roughly, 8 weeks in, we're excited about where we are and where we think we're headed. And it's been an amazing, unique experience for me to take over a job and have to, rebuild a whole new team and all that, as quickly as we have.
Well, you're definitely a natural born leader. So I'm sure as excited as the guys are and your staff is getting the kids and the wife on board with that with that move as well. How are they thinking about moving to Chicago? Any reactions, good or bad, about moving them out to the Windy City?
I jokingly said at my press conference, which this was true, when I got named the coach here, and kind of we were telling our kids, Caitlin, Davis, and Ryder, who are ages 10, 8, and 4, so still really young. I was telling my youngest that, hey, we're going to go coach a new team. Dad's going to be the coach of a new team in Chicago. He was kind of like in awe, and he had like a face like he couldn't believe what was happening. And I was like, well, what are you thinking, bud? And he essentially was like, Dad, you're going to coach Michael Jordan. And I know that was like a cool dad moment. And what's crazy is, and I'm sure Phil, your kids and growing up was the same way. Like they have no affiliation with Chicago, right? I mean, outside of just seriously Michael Jordan. Like my son, who's 4 years old, has like a red, black, and white Michael Jordan jersey that was passed on to him from his older brother, who's 8. It's just amazing the impact that Michael Jordan continues, through the Jordan brand, through his shoes, through the legacies and the decades of, and obviously he did all that in Chicago. And I think when you and I were growing up in Sacramento, we both probably had, I know I had the Michael Jordan, the shoes when they came out, the jerseys. I mean, it's a cool place. In that regard, it's a cool thing here being in Chicago, and we're a mile from the United Center and a mile, our office and facilities a mile from the Jordan statue. And it's just, like I said, it's kind of amazing.
That's awesome. Yeah. The fact that our kids are able to remember him in the same way versus guys that retired is why he's iconic in so many ways. And I have a lot of my former teammates from Fresno State or from Chicago, and so I talk with them, and just like the whole culture of basketball in Chicago with kids that grew up there, it's even more dramatic with the way that community is. No pressure on having to potentially get him an introduction or an autograph, I guess, at this point now, right? Like
hopefully,
that's really cool.
Hopefully we do something like magical enough where we can get Jordan to come visit or something. I don't know. That would be truly amazing. But yeah, no, the Bulls, man, and especially our era, just the Michael Jordan era, man. It was, as you said, iconic, in so many ways.
Yeah, and that's, you mentioned something too. When kids are at a certain age, they're not old enough to remember or be aware of the things that you're doing, and then as they get older, they can remember and are aware of what you're doing. And that, you mentioned that, and that's got to be a really cool feeling as a father.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons, probably the number one reason why I coach is because of my passion for it, but also like I think my family and my kids and the experiences that basketball and coaching have allowed myself and our family have just been, truly, truly amazing. And I think when I was head coach at UAB, my sons, both my boys, don't really remember it at all, to be honest. I mean, they were just too little. My daughter, a little bit, but even she was still, she was 6, 7 when I left UAB. So as she's gotten older, I think now them getting to experience, Dad being a head coach and being around and having access to the gym whenever they want and coming and playing around and just seeing all this it's cool. It'll be a cool experience. And as you said, hopefully something that they will like, they'll remember when they're older and be able to tell their kids about the experience as well.
Perfect segue into kind of us. Let's go back to the beginning with you. I mean, we all are a product of combined upbringing, our passions and loves. So talk about growing up in our hometown, Sacramento, where you were a legend in high school at Bella Vista, and maybe more so in your mind than in public eye. But but talk about growing up, the people and the coaches that inspired you and helped you fall in love with the game of basketball and sports, and influenced you and helped you become the individual you are today.
When I was younger, I had some great mentors that kind of just coincidentally, came into my life, or coaches, and one of the coolest things to tie it to here is one of my high school coaches was Scott Sharp. He was an assistant he was my freshman coach at Bella Vista, but then an assistant coach for me through varsity, and he was like a father figure to me, and taught me so many lessons at a young age. I think the biggest one, thinking back and how it's affected my life, was Coach Sharp when I was younger really believed in me that I was going to achieve something great. And he also really instilled in me that through hard work, like, you can achieve anything in this world. Like, there's nothing too big. And I think my, dream big, if you will, mentality, shoot for the stars, I think has really helped me throughout my career. And I really, mentally at my age, kind of circle it back to him, and the impact he had on me during high school and playing high school. I also think that college was also one of the most probably transformational periods of my life, because I think, and we had some good coaches, obviously, and some ones I'm sure will come up that I think influenced all of us, right, in good ways. But I think more than that, it was that our friend group at UC Davis was just a very unique group, from personalities to work ethic to even like emotional intelligence, people skills. I think us at a young age being around like our friend group, I think had such a big impact on my life. And I feel like in our 2 to 4 years of different people and different teammates, I really think that was played as big a factor in my success as anything, is being around all the guys at UC Davis, seeing how hard they worked, seeing their personalities and their drive and their ambitions. And man, we just had credit to the coaches, I guess, for recruiting all of us and bringing us together, but a bunch of like-minded individuals who really helped each other, if we're being honest, I think. And hopefully, I feel like I had a big impact on maybe, some of the younger guys that came after me, because I know, a couple of the older guys and even younger guys too had such a big impact on my life as well. So when I think about my life growing up in, next to all that to be said, I think my mom, growing up in a single family home, and my mom's sacrifice and work ethic in Sacramento and coming from where we lived, I think that was the foundation of who I became. But the high school part and then the college part, I think really helped me grow and develop, and set me on like a career path that's been, incredibly, a lot of luck involved. I also believe, as you said, like, you create your own luck. And I think all those things had a huge impact in my development.
That's an interesting point too, because we'll definitely shift it to the Davis. I'm looking forward to that conversation. But one of the things I do remember, and you mentioned Coach Sharp, I was always very taken by his presence during our time at Davis and how active he was in your college career. And I remember I played for Hank Meyer, who was a fantastic coach, and I learned so much from. I can remember on one hand the number of games that he was able to come to when I played in college. No practices, but I feel like Coach Sharp was a constant presence that and it struck me while I was there and while we were playing together how cool it was that you guys were so close and that he was such an active presence. And so it doesn't surprise me at all that you attribute a lot to him.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a cool deal. He was like a father figure to me. I mean, really, him with a couple other coaches taught me about basketball and but more important than that, I think just like taught me about life. And Coach Sharp comes from humble beginnings, and man, looking back, he was a grinder, and he used to work all kinds of jobs to make ends meet, and he just made a huge sacrifice for not just myself but a lot of us who went to Bella Vista at that time that he came in contact with. And I think I really took a liking to him and his family. And I think when you think about like, especially male figures in my life who helped, influence, the success I've had, he's up there, as high as anyone, because I think also of just at a time when just an age, it's just a great age of, in high school when you're 15, 16, 17, and you're figuring out how it all works. It's so important to have those kind of people around you, because I just think you're just so ripe to be developed and influenced in certain ways.
Was there any particular moment? I know I have a few myself with Coach Meyer. I can remember him actually on a Saturday practice. I'll never forget him calling me out for something I didn't do and telling me that he needed me to be like the Incredible Hulk. This was in front of all my teammates, and not like one of those little creatures that crawled out of the ground on Saturday mornings, which immediately all my teammates were like Teletubbies, and proceeded to essentially, become called a Teletubby for the rest of that season. But it stuck with me, and it was one of the funny moments where he really sent a message. Is there anything with Coach Sharp, from high school that was like one of those moments where you look back and laugh, or that really was a like kind of pivotal moment that you remember?
When I was a freshman, he was coaching me. I think I had a little too much flash, into my game. And I remember, it's so funny how when you get older, you remember things. But I remember like I had a layup or something in practice, and I tried to do like a fancy reverse, and him jumping on me, and just, it was one of the times, like when I think back, probably like the most mad he was, or at least he made a big deal out of it. And I think I was probably arrogant, to be honest, like too much confidence. And I think he was trying to reel me in the beginning of the season when we had first met. But he also, that was one of the times when I think, he would get the most like mad at me. But I think he just taught us like work ethic. He would work all night at restaurants, and and then we would have practice sometimes in the morning. He'd come straight to practice without sleeping. I mean, and it's those kind of things that you remember where you don't really know at the time like how much of an impact that they're having on you. But I think back and I'm like, again, teaching me like anything's possible if you like outwork people. That was like, I think he really did a great job of installing that in me. There's a great video. I'm drawing a blank on the guy's name, but it was where he's giving a speech at a graduation, and it was essentially saying that his father used to wake up at 4 a.m. every day to go to work and to do all these things before work. And one time his wife asked him, or one of the kids asked him, like, "Dad, why are you doing this? Why do you wake up so early?" And his answer was that in hopes that my kids see me in the act of excellence, and essentially that it rubs off on them. And I thought that was like such a powerful thing, because all of us who have, achieved something or worked hard, you get it from somewhere, right? Like you see it somewhere and it clicks in your brain.
Absolutely.
And I think, Coach Sharp was like that. My mom was like that as well. Just in demonstrating what hard work really what sacrifice, what hard work really, really looked like.
Without a doubt. Yeah, that point you just made too about it being something that you don't necessarily pick up or aren't really aware of in the moment, I think is one of the most important things that coaches have to kind of keep in mind, as well as same thing goes with parenting, right? Like,
yeah,
kids are always watching, athletes are always watching, and you're affected. And in so many cases, you're as a kid or an athlete, you're just trying to get through the moment, right? That whatever it is, that hurdle. But when you mature, you get older, and you have an opportunity to kind of take a deep breath and you're not under pressure, and you start to evaluate the situation, it does start to sink in whatever it was that you were taught or what you took from it. And the being able to be consistent in those messages can have a big impact, in not just that performance of that season, right, but in life and in the next endeavor, right? So what Coach Sharp did for you in high school facilitated and enabled you to overcome a lot of what we went through at Davis and beyond. And
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing for coaches. And not an instant gratification of knowing you made an impact on kids, but you can see it down the road. And I to this day, there's so many things that I realized I had no idea what I was learning in the moment, but it's directly been a lesson I've carried forward in almost every part of my life in so many areas. So yeah, very, very, very cool, man. Well, and that kind of brings us to our time playing together at UC Davis. Very well touched on in the beginning by you as far as our team and the guys, from the grind of our 5 a.m. workouts and kind of tearing our bodies down to being able to compete and create memories as a group. But talk to me about how you got to Davis. What was the process? I mean, Davis is a short drive from where we grew up in Sacramento, but how did who were you recruited by? What kind of drew you to Davis and kind of put you on a path that brought us together?
Yeah, I didn't have as much, big time. I mean, I wasn't as recruited as heavily, I think as I thought was going to be or wanted to be when I was in high school. And so Davis was an option. Coach Tressler, who was there, who didn't even get a chance to coach me because he had left before I got there, but Coach Tressler had kind of recruited me a little bit, and it ended up, when I got there, it ended up being a preferred walk on. That's how it started at Davis, and then obviously I was able to kind of earn my way and earn a scholarship. But yeah, and going back to Coach Sharp was the first one to bring me up there to pick up in the spring, and I remember playing with the guys the first time spring of my senior year, and I went up there a handful of times, and honestly, they kind of said, hey, you could be on the team if you want to, be a walk on. And then it was also kind of, there was still, when I got there in the first week of school, and there was still kind of a tryout. And I remember, this, and conditioning was a big deal, right, at UC Davis. And I think not just Davis, but all places back in our era, start of school before the season, conditioning was a badge of honor. Coaches, it's changed so much, but coaches were going to try to test you, right, and beat you down and make you do all these crazy physical tests. And as like, ironically, that was my strength. So I was just so good at that kind of stuff. And so I remember like the first couple weeks of conditioning as a preferred walk-on, I was as a freshman, I rolled in there and was really, really good. And I think they saw that, and that was that was the start of me being on the team, redshirting my first year, which was awesome. Living in the dorms, at UC Davis, I think was one of the best years of my life. Now looking back, just all being a freshman in college and having a roommate and going through all that. And UC Davis, obviously a very good academic institution, being close to home. So it checked a lot of boxes. And when I went there, honestly, I don't know, Phil, if you felt like I never knew if I was going to, the Division I thing kind of was out the window, because we were Division II when I went there. Never thought I would play Division I basketball, but I was happy there. I loved our group of guys, as we talked about, the camaraderie, the friendships, the relationships. I mean, you and I know some of our memories outside of basketball, right? This was before name, image, and likeness. So, all our going through that, so redshirting and then playing for 4 years, going through a coaching change was very interesting. Going through and then going through a Division II to Division I transfer, and then having an opportunity to play a lot and be a starter for most of the games on a Division I team, something I never thought really would be accomplished, was kind of cool, and something I can look back on. And I think I'm proud, now, you probably as well, like UC Davis has done well, and Coach Les there has taken them to the tournament in the last 6 or 7 years. They went once. And so I think and when you say UC Davis, I played basketball at UC Davis. It's, they've built a good reputation, and obviously academically just a great school. So just an amazing experience. I would be remiss if I didn't forget probably the most important thing about my time at Davis was, I met my wife there, Lindsay. You knew Lindsay. She was part of our friend group a little bit, right?
Yep.
So getting to meet my soulmate there, and a quick funny story, but we had our daughter in 2013. She was named Caitlin. We were moving houses when our second son, or excuse me, my first son was about to be born, and we moved in to a house in Birmingham, and the next door neighbors who were about our age, they had a daughter named Caitlin, their oldest daughter, and they had a son named Davis. So kind of ironically, so when Lindsay got pregnant with my son, and we're thinking of names, we kind of stole the neighbor's name Davis because we didn't have a great name that we loved, and because we met at UC Davis. So my first son is named Davis. Honestly, partly after UC Davis because of, again, all the memories, and we met there, and so yeah, kind of a cool thing, and just an amazing 5 years.
That's funny. On the name thing, it's funny. Our son, his name is Christian Jet, abbreviated to CJ, so we call him CJ. And I was very adamant with my wife Laura that we name our son with something that was able to be initialed and shortened, because explained to her over the world of guys in sports, you're going to end up with a nickname one way or another. And if you give a kid a nickname that's basically preset, he can potentially avoid ending up with a nickname that is wildly off the wall and maybe not one he wants. And in my experience, because being named Phil, I had Philly blunts, Philly cheesesteak, all the way down the line, and then I ended up becoming Cheese at Davis because of Philly cheesesteak. And then old school comes out, and the cheese comment comes out. Next thing I know, I'm it's Philly cheesesteak, and then I was Cheese. And like I was telling him, like, if you'd told me my nickname would have been Cheese growing up, I would have said how and why. So I was very committed to our son being named CJ so that he could avoid that. That's funny, but name's got to mean something. But yeah, kind of shifting into our time there and some of the things you hit it very articulately as far as what it meant to be with the guys that we played with, and for me, I remember, I started my career and wasn't as highly recruited, same thing, ended up, getting a scholarship to Fresno State to play for Coach Tarkanian, and was like a relief, and then had this great year, and then it went, like almost a 180-degree turn south next year with the new staff, and blew out my ankle. And so I actually, when I was evaluating and chose to come to Davis, where it was a good fit. It was close to home, like you said, and it had just, they just made the announcement of going from Division II to Division I, and it allowed me to not sit a year, which I really wanted to play. And then, I signed my scholarship, and a few weeks later, the head coach, Coach Vogel, that I was, there to go play for, he's gone, and we ended up playing for another guy that didn't recruit me. And my confidence was, went from like kind of sky high to like, where do I fit? And I was trying to figure out, and coming to the group of guys that I came to was such a big part of, making the experience great. And Gus Arginal, who's also gone on to be, a great coach, which writing was on the wall there as well. But all you guys, helped, kind of create that experience for me. And it was like most kids, it wasn't the experience that I, anticipated or envisioned, but it was better in so many ways by it being different. And, I can remember early on meeting you and, our history in Sacramento. And I think it's important to note, for so many people, the idea of you playing, your size and your strength and all the things, you are not a physical specimen when you walk out on the floor. And which makes your comments about Coach Sharp and your irrational confidence, something that I think is important. You have to have irrational confidence as an athlete to be able to overachieve and reach potential. But your positive outlook and your way of connecting with people, and that mentality was a big part of what shaped the culture in the program. And for a guy like me who was certainly more at 6'7", certainly had more of a presence. It was a big part of helping me kind of refine my footing, being around someone like yourself, and the type of leadership that you exhibited right from the get-go. So I was then and always have looked at you as someone that I emulate and certainly admire for your natural ability to connect and be a leader. So in no way, shape, or form have I ever been surprised about your success since then. But I will say, funny stories in that career, time frame of Davis. I look back and I think about a lot of our practices. We had some great assistant coaches. Coach Klink, certainly to this day, one of them that I most admire in this world. Coach Dubois, Coach Steinberg, list can go on, and we played for Coach Gary Stewart. What did you most take from the time that you played between our staff with Coach Stewart, your time previously with Coach Fogel and staff? Were there any kind of major things that you look back on that you took with you?
Into coaching, you mean?
Coaching, life, like kind of the impact.
Yeah. I think, interestingly enough, I think one of the reasons, especially when you joined the team, we were so close as a group, and was not only just like the personalities of everybody and all that, but I think we had gone through Coach Stewart, as hard as it was, like put us through a lot of like adversity. Like we went through a ton of shared adversity, and you hear about it, especially I feel like nowadays, our generation, those kind of experiences are becoming less and less. But if you and I sat here and we had two other teammates and we talked about what our most memorable moments at UC Davis, especially practice wise, right? I'm sure 75% would be the hard things that we did and that we went through, right? So those are kind of the ones that you remember the most. And I think, I think the biggest thing I think at Davis from a coaching standpoint was just the work ethic and the you know what I mean, and the intensity, and I think the demand of competing, that we did. I think those are the biggest things that I think I tried to take over, that I've maybe tried to take from me, and a little bit from everybody. As you mentioned, we had some great assistant coaches that I'm super close with, and looking back, I don't know, I say this in a positive way, some great men, like some great people. Looking back, we were doing some funny stuff basketball wise, and I don't even remember how it was. Honestly, I can't even remember if it was like relative to other teams and programs. But man, when I think about basketball wise, how the games evolved, right? What we were doing, I'm like, what were we doing? Jokingly, right? And and my memories are not of like none of that stuff, but it's more just Coach Klink and the relationships he built with us, and how he treated us, and his intensity, and believing in what was right, and Coach Dubois, his energy, and same, all those guys, right, that you mentioned. I think, and you have a different relationship with the assistant coaches than you do the head coach, obviously. That's something I'm very aware of, and being in both roles. So yeah, I think the culture of the guys, though, is the biggest thing, that I hope. And I think it's harder nowadays, especially the higher level of college basketball. This is a high level that we're at, and I've been fortunate to be at only, pretty high levels. That's lacking nowadays because of the transfer portal and because of the financials now that of college basketball, that rarely are guys there for that long. There's not as much probably shared adversity, and basketball at our level has become more professional like in terms of transactional, excuse me. And I think one thing, I'll say this, I think my experience at Davis, one thing I still to this day will as a head coach, because you have more obviously influence and control when you're the head coach, is believing in building camaraderie and developing people and doing things outside of basketball. And even if you have guys on your team and they're only here for, one season or 10 months or 11 months, we're going to do the best we can to teach them life lessons, to help them build relationships that hopefully will last beyond their time here, at UIC and wherever we are. And I think that's one unique thing that separates me, I think, especially as a head coach from others, is winning games is obviously hugely important, and it affects, my job and the livelihoods of myself and our staff. But at the end of the day, I believe strongly in developing the person as a whole, into working your butt off, but also having fun and getting the most out of this experience. Because just like myself and you, Phil, like these guys are in college for only 4 or 5 years, and then it's over, and you'll never get this time back. And it's such a transformational time, in their lives, that I want to be a positive, influence, and I want our staff to have a positive influence on them during that time.
Yeah, post COVID, I've seen there's some 6 and 7 7 year guys out of there. Yeah, I agree. The basketball was at times terrible. I put in a game like I told you before to watch, and watching that pinch offense and watching paint dry was probably a comparison that is not too far off from entertainment. But the toughness of getting through things, like I a good part of my life after I finished, I literally would wake up to difficult things and be like, oh, it's not 5 a.m. I'm not heading to the track to start an insane workout, so it's not that bad. Yeah. And being able to kind of know that anything that was thrown at me, I felt like I could get over, because it wasn't, from a perspective standpoint, as kind of grueling or as miserable as going to the track at 5 a.m. But also, like you said, the relationships, the guys, and like what it was to get through those things together, and the way that we made good out of difficult situations. But I remember my junior year, your senior year, we struggled early in the year. I missed my first 10 threes, and I remember we went and we played in the this University of San Francisco tournament. We went and we got blown out by St. Joe's. We played terribly, and coach was on a tear. I dislocated my thumb in that game, and I hadn't made a three yet. I think we were 4 games in. I was like 0 for 10. We were all in our own heads. I wasn't even sure if we were going to play, but I remember, this is one of those moments that we've talked about in the past. And I was in my head trying to figure out, like, God, I got to get going, all over the place. And you came up to me before, and I'll let you tell the story, is what was going through your head. And we had a conversation, and again, in the moment, I don't know that I knew that it impacted me in that way. It was more of just a lighthearted conversation, but it definitely was an example of you being at a level where you were outside of yourself and able to look at and try to impact others on the team. When a guy like me at that point, I was in my own little world trying to figure it out. Yeah. So I'll let you tell the story, because it's definitely better coming from you.
Who did we play that game, Phil? Gosh, I'm
Longwood.
Is that who it was?
Made the tournament. Yeah, they made the tournament, and I was cracking up, and I was like, "Oh, I remember that. Remember that game vividly, seeing them make the tournament."
This is one of my best coaching stories, because, like, in preparing for this and just writing a few notes, this is one of there's a few that come to my head. This is one of my best ones that I can remember still to this day. And it was as a player, not a coach. But I remember you being mentally, you just said it, in your head about coach too. I think at the time he was on you hard, and you said it. He was going crazy because we had got beat bad. And how I remember the story is me telling you before the game, and I feel like it was like right before the game, like with a couple minutes to go, Phil, for this game, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to mentally think you are playing for your favorite coach in the world. Every time you turn around to the bench, or every time you interact with coach today, interact with him like it's your favorite person that's ever coached you. And I remember telling you to do that. And then I remember you went out and had like 28 points or something amazing, and we won the game. And I do think in my mind, it's one of, like, honestly, like top 5 best coaching stories that I have of, like, this was like, I think just the timing of everything, but like, yeah, I was able to, hope, was it that conversation? I don't know. But, I think it was, it had a direct impact on you. And I think afterwards you saying, or us talking about how big of a, impact that had on you, me telling you that, I think what's interesting 20 years ago is mental performance, mindfulness was not brought up, was not a thing. You know what I mean? Mental health wasn't even really a thing. And nowadays, it's so big. And I think that was an example of like, I remember, like, I think telling you and some of the guys, like, you're tricking your mind for 40 minutes, right? Like, trick your mind to be able to do something extraordinary. And I think it worked out. And yeah, really cool, obviously, moment for us, but yeah, cool story that still to this day, 42 years old, I still remember like it was yesterday. And I remember the gym and yeah, kind of where we were and all that.
100%. Well, and I'll add a little color to it because it's funny. So I dislocated my thumb my senior year of high school, like at Oracle Arena. We were playing, or junior year of high school actually, playing De La Salle, and I went for a steal in the NorCal semis, and I like reached in, and my right thumb popped out and literally was facing that way, and trainer popped it back in and finished the game. And I say that backstory because playing and struggling early in the year, and in the St. Joe's game, I had a similar play, and my thumb popped out, but popped right back in. And I knew it because I had experienced it in the past, and I knew that feeling of my thumb swelled up. And so we played terribly. Coach Stewart's going bananas on us, and then he proceeds to basically, I remember him telling me, like, when I said I dislocated my thumb, he goes, "That's not possible." And he basically said, "It's not possible." And I remember thinking, what are you talking about? Like, how is that not possible? And it was like discrediting it. And my thumb hurt so bad. So I had this tape, and I hadn't made a three in the year. And we go to shoot around that morning after the beatdown, and he's not coaching. And so I have this tape all around my wrist. And I'm trying to figure out how to hold the ball, for one, how I can, it's not on my shooting hand, but it's on my gripping hand. And I'm trying to like shoot. And I remember we're doing shooting, and I shot an air ball on one of my first shots, not being able to, properly grip the ball. And Coach Stewart proceeded to make a huge scene in front of the whole team, like throughout the rest of shoot around, the fact that I had, shot an air ball, and had already struggled to make shots, first part of the year. Now he's on me about this, and I'm sitting there, and I remember just being so pissed, like, what is this dude's problem? Like, I'm not complaining about it. I'm just trying to figure it out, but he won't get off my head. And then starting to go into my head before the game, like, why am I not playing the way that I'm capable of? And feeling like I was letting all of you guys down, feeling like I wasn't living up to the Division I transfer, like all these thoughts that, mental health, like, are not going to help you be successful, right? And it's all serious and negative, and not really feeling like anybody was, with me, feeling really alone and just a dark kind of mental headspace. And then you coming over and saying that, one, it was the idea of you reaching out and, kind of recognizing it without me saying anything. And two, the humor in it, which is, your classic. And, you use some choice words and, some ways, given that we were all pretty on edge with Coach Stewart at that particular time, and the awareness and the presence that you had to see that, at that age. So that's, one of those traits in terms of leadership, that was a moment for me of recognizing that, when you transfer your energy into helping those around you, it can have a huge impact. And it did for me. And that floodgates opened, and we went off and running, and it definitely one of those moments that stuck out for me. And certainly a story I'm glad you tell, because I definitely validated it. I also remember your attitude and your approach to our workouts, and you mentioned your ability to be in fitness and in shape, and the way that you were able to kind of lighten the mood while getting through some of our workouts. Also, the kind of thing that I talk about it all the time. The ability to kind of create humor in difficult situations is a great way to keep the right balance and right focus. And has that always been for you, kind of one of your ways of communicating is to kind of create laughter and lightheartedness as well?
You know what? It's a good point. I think as an assistant coach, yes, that for sure has been one of my strengths, and kind of and not only with the team and with the players, but also with, staff. and staff camaraderie is such a big deal. As a head coach, if I'm being honest, especially in the first time or go around, I think the pressure, the stress, um, was I think I lost a little bit of that. I think I didn't have that as much when I became a head coach, and I do think that is one of my strengths. And it is funny that you bring that up, and I think it is something that for myself too, like to just be more mindful of, because it is who I am, as a person. And yeah, it's a good point. But I definitely throughout the years as an assistant coach, and I think building relationships within athletic departments and my ability to move up the coaching ladder quickly, I do think a lot of it has to do with not only my work, my competency and my work ethic, but also my, yeah, like kind of my personality and my ability to relate, connect with people, and my ability to have fun with people. And, I think, yeah, has been a very key component to my success.
That's a perfect segue and a pivot to how we are sitting here today, and you've amassed almost 2 decades now as a coach. I want to go back to your senior year. We finish our season. You finish. You're moving on, and I'm getting ready for my senior season. And you get a job at Deloitte, I believe, or an offer to take a job at Deloitte. And I remember the conversation, the congratulations, and all of that, and that being the path that you were on. And then you leave and you go to the East Coast to work a basketball camp, and come back. And the next thing that I, remember is a conversation starting about you getting an opportunity to become a college basketball GA and work for legendary coach Gary Williams, and kind of evaluating that situation. And so kind of going back to that time, and kind of the start of your coaching journey, what was it like? How did that opportunity under Coach Williams come to be? What was that decision making process like for you, as far as the influence and guidance? And
Yeah, so the first thing is when I was in college, I would go out and I would work the Maryland basketball camps. And that literally came off just an idea kind of that I had. And I was cold emailing some of the big storied programs, Maryland, Duke, Carolina. As growing up in California where we did, like ACC basketball at that time was so big. And I remember Maryland, their assistant coach. I actually said I would come work for free. I just wanted to get experience. Maryland assistant coach said, "Hey, I got you down. You can come work camp." I did that for a couple years every summer. One summer I took with Jesse Pruitt, who's played with us in college and now is a coach. So I took him with me one summer out to Maryland. But I wasn't sure when I was in college, especially at the end, that I wanted to coach. One of the reasons is um, I think the financial piece, being getting an economics degree from Davis and seeing our coaches who didn't make a lot of money, and we're kind of, financially they were fine, but they weren't making it, they weren't killing it, right? And I think all of us like all of our friend group, man, we had big dreams. We were gonna, buy big houses and drive big cars and kill it. And so I think, and the entrepreneurial part of me, wasn't really sure that I wanted to coach because of my experience seeing those coaches. But when so I got that job it was actually Accenture, not Deloitte. But when I got that job offer at Accenture, I was planning to do it. I was going to do it unless something came about that was kind of magical. I was going to do it. And in the off season, Maryland's GA job came open. I remember driving. You were a part of these weekends. I remember it was like Memorial Day. So it was around this time, I was driving to houseboats with a couple of the guys. And I found out that their GA job came open. And I called and I said, "Hey, I'd love to have the job." And I was planning to go work their summer camp anyways that summer before I started in August. And I think in the back of my mind, I was doing this just because what if something crazy happens or like I could ever get a job in coaching, or I wanted to keep those connections just because of like, you never know what could happen. And, lo and behold, they had that job open. I went out there. I interviewed for the GA job. They offered me the job. I told Accenture I was not going to go, and my whole career went a different path. And at that time, honestly, if I didn't get that Maryland job, I wasn't going to coach. But one of the things I sold them on, I think, when I was interviewed with them and I had been out there a lot, was I was like, I don't think they realized how big of an opportunity this was for me. I mean, this was only a grad assistant for them, but for me and even our friend group, right, Phil, and our family, and this was like the biggest thing in the world. How did a kid from California play to UC Davis, small Division I at the time, like get an opportunity to go be in a GA at Maryland? Like Maryland, to us at that time was bigger than life, right? And I told them that, and I did a good job, I think, of selling that, because it was. And then, and right from there, it just kind of changed the whole trajectory of not only my career, but my life, to be honest.
Was there an adjustment for you when you moved out to the East Coast at all, or
No,
were you just so immersed in the program that that wasn't much of a time to
no.
absorb it?
I mean, I got an MBA. I did an MBA at the University of Maryland University College, which was predominantly, at the time, it was mostly online then. And I rented a room in, honestly, not a nice place of like right off campus. Like, it wasn't a nice area. I literally rented like a $250 a month room in like a 3-bedroom tiny house that was a mile and a half from campus. And I literally like lived in the office. And for 2 or 3 years, I mean, it was just so much. There wasn't really a whole lot of experiencing, I take that back. Like DC, Lindsay's, my brother-in-law, was there. So I did a little bit of, but just a little bit of searching around and exploring, but it was more like being with the team and being with Gary and helping him with a bunch of things. And obviously just getting to see all the things that Maryland basketball was and is. And it was bunkered down for a couple of years, though, of just incredibly hard work.
I mean, you went to Maryland at a time when the program in particular was, obviously in the ACC, and it was, very well known and respected and super successful. And during your time there, you guys won an ACC championship in 2010, and multiple NCAA appearances, lots and lots of winning. You start to make your impact in the coaching world as one of the youngest and fastest rising coaches in all of college basketball. And I think at the time you were the youngest. When you moved up from the GA and on, you ended up becoming the youngest assistant in the ACC. During that period where we're talking about your ability to connect, you obviously made a name as a recruiter, and you, using that natural ability, you brought in guys like Gravis Vasquez, Alex Lynn, and guys that went on to have NBA careers, and I'm sure couldn't say enough about you. But in doing all that and having that success and establishing, part of that comes with your natural ability, but also the confidence and the belief that Coach Williams instilled in you, and by giving you the job and then continuing to promote you. What did you kind of take, and what impact did he have on you in your career, with your time, working under coach, learning from him, getting his support and tutelage, kind of coming from his tree, and anything about working with Coach Williams that like funny stories and things that you remember that really stick out?
Yeah, I mean, there was, I mean, funny stories is like I'd have to think, but you could go on for days. I mean, Coach, listen, I think at the end of the day, I tell this to people, I got a PhD in running and coaching at a high level of college basketball and running a high level basketball team. And Maryland basketball at that time, I mean, it's not just coaching about. I mean, it's like a Fortune 500 company, especially administratively and and all the stuff that Coach had to do. And I was so close to him in the early years, helping him almost as a personal secretary. So I got to just get a PhD and immerse myself in everything that comes with running a college basketball program. And from where I started as a GA to where I finished with him in 6 years as like an assistant coach, I was able, this was a blessing in my career, to start at the bottom of the organization, if you will, the staff, and get experience in everything on the way up. we also had some great assistant coaches who I think I learned so much from during that time. And Coach Williams is single-handedly the person most responsible for my success professionally, because he took a chance on me, at 24 years old, 25 years old, and really made my career and jump started my career by making me an assistant coach at Maryland at that age. He trusted me. I think he had told a few people, and he had kind of said to me at times that my ability, like, at that level, you're dealing with, like any business, you're just dealing with a lot of problems on a daily basis, or you're solving problems on a daily basis, whether it's basketball on the court, whether it's off the court, whether there's so much to do. And then I do remember him saying that, like, I had immersed myself in all these things, and meaning that anytime there was some kind of problem came up, he was observing that Rob was involved in helping solve it. And I think being a problem solver, being, a worker at that time, and then earning his trust were things that he, really valued in me. And I think the lesson too for me is I've always thought, like, he gave me an opportunity at a young age when he could have hired somebody with a lot more experience because he trusted me. And I do think you see it all the time. Coaches are sometimes hesitant to promote from within, especially like younger coaches who have less experience. And a lot of times when they do promote from within on someone they trust, on someone who's shown loyalty and work ethic, it almost always turns out to be a positive. It's just, I think, mentally sometimes for people getting over the hump of hiring somebody that's younger or with less experience.
Another one of our former teammates from Mel Morentis and I took a visit out to come watch a game, and we got to tour VC, got to go see some of the museums and do all that. But seeing you within the program and just the way that you connected with guys, knowing the relationship you had with for example, Gravis Vasquez and some of those guys that went on to be NBA draft picks and have careers. What did that do for you as far as being able to see in that coaching space, I recruit a kid, bring him in, help develop him, know his goals and his ambitions are to achieve this, to move on, and to be a part of helping facilitate and enable them to to move on? Did that create kind of a sense and a bigger picture that you took forward, since you were able to have that early in your career, kind of at the highest level?
Yeah, I think I learned so much and got to experience so much at a young age, and really, like anything, make mistakes at a young age that just were able to help me, in the future. And I think that those, the experiences I had of going through, like, as you just mentioned, recruiting and a lot of recruiting misses. I mean, I could give you it was a who's who of guys that I tried on and missed it at Maryland. Including, like, I was joking because I had with my son, because I have his number in my phone from 2010, but Kyrie Irving, I was one of the first guys to offer Kyrie Irving a scholarship. I offered him a scholarship, went to see him a bunch. We ended up taking another point guard because he had kind of blown up. We didn't think we could get him. So we took another point guard. And I remember where I was when Kyrie called me and said, "Hey, coach, like, I saw you got another point guard. What does that mean?" I'm like, "Yeah, man. Hey, listen, we still like to recruit you, but it might be a little bit tougher now that we took another point guard." And then he just became, obviously, one of the best players in the world over time and went to Duke and all that. But getting those experiences at a young age were invaluable. Being able to be at it, like, we would joke about it because I was only a couple years older than the players. So being able to relate to them on that level, especially when Coach Williams was an older Hall of Fame type coach, I was able to connect with the guys, on a different level. And I was able to, be a friend, be a coach, train them, work them out, but also, be a great listener to them at times as well. I think I was talking about coaching stories. One of the other best things that came from me at a young age was in the 2008-2009 season at Maryland. We were kind of struggling, and we were playing Gravis Vasquez off the ball at the 2 because, just from a personnel standpoint, he was our leading scorer. And he was a great, like, he was going to do whatever coach said. And he played some point guard as well. And I'll never forget, like, we lost, I think, to Clemson pretty bad. And him and I were in the gym one night, or we went to lunch or something the next day, and we were talking, and he was like, "Hey man," he's like, he was kind of like asking me, like, maybe I should, like, I want to play the point. Like, I want to be the starting point guard. And he was, keep in mind, he was our leading scorer, leading minutes, and he did play some point, but I think he was, in his mind, he was the two, and he probably started at the two because we had Eric Hayes at the one, who kind of brought the ball up the floor. And I was like, I thought about, and so I'm like, just talking, I'm like, yeah, it's okay. Yeah, awesome. And I'll never forget, like, I'm like, that's a good point. And I went in our staff meeting, and I told coach, I said, hey, Gravis wants to play the point. And keep in mind, it wasn't that big of a deal, meaning, like, it wasn't a big switch. He had been playing the point at times, right? I said, he wants to be the point guard. I think it's a good idea. And lo and behold, we switched him to the point guard. He started playing really well, like better than he had been playing. The team started playing better. We ended up going to the NCAA tournament. It wasn't the only reason, like, we were successful at the end of the year, but we had a great run after that. And it was about the mental part of him being the point guard. But I think if I wasn't as close to him and we didn't have that relationship, and me to be able to really listen and then take that feedback and bring it to coach, and coaches, humility too, to say, okay, yeah, I think that's it. Like, let's go with that. Let's try something different. That was kind of a really, just a great lesson that I learned at a young age too. Is like, you got to listen to the guys, and especially as an assistant coach, man, you can help solve problems like that big because of your relationships with the guys.
That's awesome. Two things that I want to dig deeper on questions. Quick on Kyrie was his talent. I mean, we see and know him today as, widely recognized as the most skilled player in the
Yeah.
NBA, maybe one of the most skilled, uh, and with his ability to finish. What did you see, and how would you describe him as a high school player that you
Yeah.
were recruiting, and somebody that you were legitimately pursuing to come play at Maryland?
Well, so when he was younger, he was smaller. Well, I mean, still small, but he was smaller. He wasn't a great, let me go to the next. He wasn't a great shooter. And when he was younger, it was hard to really tell how good he was going to be. And but he just played at such a high level, high school, St. Patrick's. But he played with Michael Kidd Gilchrist when he was younger. Michael Kidd Gilchrist was the highly touted recruit. Kyrie was like the second best player on that team. They used to play on a shorter court, and like their high school, or they would practice there. And I remember taking Coach Williams one time, and Coach Williams wasn't sold that he was very good, because in a short court, you couldn't really tell Kyrie's speed and quickness because it was a shorter court, and he didn't shoot the ball great, and he was small. And so it wasn't like he's dunking on people or anything like that. But as the more and more I watched him, like, he just had the more you watched him, just his instincts. I mean, his basketball instincts were so ridiculous, and he was right-handed, but he always shot like left-handed layups, and he handled the ball better with his left all the time. It was just another unique thing about him. That as recruiting went on, and I remember one time watching him and being like, wow, he's going to be special. Like, did we ever know he was going to be, like, end up being one and done and all that? But I knew he was going to be special, like, junior year. I remember watching him in New Jersey at a high school game, and I remember calling coach being like, man, he just had a big time game against big time competition. Like, he's going to be really good.
Career. That's crazy to hear. And then so, like, pivoting also on the Gravis Vasquez piece, I think the importance of the dynamic of having a relationship with the players and taking their input, and not being a dictator without the humility and awareness to take input from all of your assistants and staff. Did that come naturally to you from the beginning?
Yep, I think I was more personally closed-minded too when I first became a head coach, just wanting to control everything. Now I'm the head coach, so handling that dynamic with the players who you had great relationships with, who you had different relationships, I should say, with you. Now transitioning to more of a, like, the authoritative figure, and I think wanting to have everything be perfect was like a big flaw of mine in my first time around as a head coach. But I think without a doubt, look, I think humility is one of the key components to almost anybody's greatness and almost anything to some degree. I mean, was Michael Jordan, humble? I don't know. He was, was Kobe Bryant, I think at the end probably, but two of the greatest, like, competitors who I think you could say were selfish and, you know what I mean? And were obviously extremely confident and driven. But I think to each his own. And I think there is a lot of power, especially for me now, to being a head coach in the second time is just understanding, the humility piece. And oftentimes, man, the players have the answers. I think the players have the answers, but because of the relationship dynamic, because of maybe the ego of the coach, because of maybe the fearfulness of the players wanting to speak out, there is sometimes a lack of communication there. And I think I'm going to try, my best here as we go on in this, as this second go around as a head coach, to just be more mindful of that, to be more mindful. And I think you're seeing it now in the NBA more than ever, like, you know what I mean? Of just the communication, and those guys are playing, and they, as good of a coach as you are, they're in the action, and they see it better than you. But you got to create that trust. Like I said, you got to create that trust. You got to have that humility to be able to have those conversations that can help.
One of the things that you hit on that I think is really important is, when you step into leadership roles, leadership is a constant growth and a constant development, and being the leader doesn't mean you have all the answers. Being a leader is a big part is to bring the information in from those around you. And in the end, you got to take credit and take blame for whatever happens, regardless of where the ideas or things came from. But, I think, speaking to you, you've never had an insatiable ego. A desire for perfection, I think, is the area where it's the biggest challenge, right? Is wanting it to be perfect and trying to control everything is a natural reaction to people that want to create success, right? When you're so invested in creating success, a lot of times the need to control it all to ensure that is what leads. But being able to let go and growth comes from wisdom and age, and that's it's very, very cool to hear, because it's a natural part of everybody's growth. So just kind of shifting on to the next part of your career. So then you get this incredible time under Coach Williams, and then you have your first kind of move, and you move over and you spent a year with Coach Seth Greenberg over at Virginia Tech. And I remember talking to you back then, kind of about that experience, but tell me a little bit about kind of what that experience was like, anything that stuck out working with Coach and your time at Virginia Tech.
I think the biggest thing for me was just it was the first time in my career working under somebody different. And at Maryland, everything was so in line, and everyone knew how Gary did things, and man, we just had everything buttoned up. There was obviously an adjustment for me, just learning a new way of doing things. I think that was the biggest, adjustment. Good experience. Got a chance to really grow my network recruiting, because I did so much recruiting that year, and also got a chance to be around Coach Greenberg, who I think is one of the best basketball minds, just a really, really good basketball mind on tons of different basketball topics because of his experience. So did it for a year before, going to Birmingham with Coach Jared Haas when he first got the job at UAB. And one of the reasons why I made that move was I thought at that point in my career, the one thing, I was so driven to be a head coach, even though I was still young. And the one thing I thought that my resume did not have was I had not been a part of a program where there was a new coach, or you had proven that you could build something, if you will. Maryland, I walked in at the end of his career. Seth, I walked in kind of at the end of his time at Virginia Tech. So now going to UAB as an assistant with Jared Haas, it was the ability to be able to show the ability to help build a program, take over as a new coach. And we were lucky to do that in 4 years, and had a great experience.
So how did you connect with Coach Haas and lead into that job? Was that someone that you had built a relationship with before? Or did you interview for that job kind of as it came up?
Yeah.
What was the process like?
When I was at Maryland, Coach Haas was at Carolina, and we just play. And this is common, like recruiting and playing against these guys. You just get a chance to know them. And Coach Hass was from South Lake Tahoe, so obviously from the California area. Played at Kansas, played at Cal. I mean, I knew who he was. He was kind of like a big deal too to me when I was younger. Remember watching him in college. And so just being in the same league, getting a chance to meet and get to know the Carolina staff through the years. When he got the UAB job, him and I had always kept in touch. We had talked outside of recruiting and playing, and that's kind of how. And he was very close with another person that I was close with that I had worked for. And it's the cliche, it's who you know, but yeah, part of it is the relationships that I had built with him, and then I think also a combination of the reputation that I had built. And yeah, that's kind of how I was able to get there.
And then you spend 8 years in the program, so that's an extremely long time to be anywhere in life, any profession. But 8 years, 4 years as coach's assistant, moving up, and I think we're an associate head coach with him, right, at points. And then you take over and get your first opportunity as a head coach in at the UAB program, where you've already established yourself and have a 4-year run there. What was that like, that opportunity, that experience? And there was obviously a transition. So walk us through kind of the emotions and the process of taking over your first job as a head coach.
Yeah, I mean, we could do a whole podcast on just that, the transition. But it was, I was 33 years old at the time. I joke that I think myself, my family, the fans, the donors, I mean, I thought I was going to be the next Brad Stevens, if you will, just because I was so young and I was taking over this job, and I had such a big impact on us winning 2 championships, and we had almost everybody coming back. And the first 6 months of being a head coach at UAB were the polar opposite of being the first 6 months here at UIC. And what I mean by that is we didn't have to get one recruit. There was no recruiting. The guys who were coming were coming. Nobody was transferring. We had our whole team. I mean, there was no recruiting at all. And we had already established our offense and defense. Like, it was the complete opposite, right? Didn't have to move. But I was taking over a program with huge expectations, like out of this world expectations, to be honest, at that time. And I do think in coaching college basketball, timing is one of the most important things to being successful. The time you take over and the situation and the resources. We were also at UAB going through an interesting time where UAB athletics had cut the football team, and then they decided a year later to bring it back. So there was a lot going on from a department-wide stuff. So amazing opportunity. Failed more than I succeeded, obviously. Had some great moments. Amazing time for my family, for our staff. Built some amazing relationships in Birmingham that I still have to this day. Birmingham, all my 3 kids were born there. UAB gave me a chance at a young age that I will forever be indebted to. Again, so many leadership lessons, so many basketball coaching lessons. I mean, just so many things you go through, and we had a lot of success. I mean, a winning record. And I think because of the success we had, obviously, it's one of the reasons why I'm here now at UIC today, back as a head coach. So I think it is, I'm appreciative that multiple people, around the world, around the country, if you will, and around our profession and around college basketball recognize how good of a job I did at a young age, and just a cool experience.
That's an awesome place to start out your career as a head coach. And follow-up question to your UAB experience: over the course of your 4 years there, you had a lot of success, as you mentioned, right? You had multiple 21 seasons, or en route to that, winning season all 4 years. Had a program and a career that kind of looked like it was in a particular direction that I'm sure you felt a lot of confidence in, and kind of certainty in that regard. We, as leaders and as coaches, you teach a lot about dealing with adversity and kind of life change as a part of coaching and games. And so for you as a coach, you hit what would be probably your first kind of adversity moment, right? That your last season at UAB is on track to be another 20-win season. We all experienced the life disruption that was COVID and cuts that season short. And then you, at that point, kind of have your first move where you and UAB agree to part ways. And I'm sure that given the direction, that was probably your first challenge in what was a rapidly, youngest upstart coach. So talk to me about that experience. And you already mentioned some of the lessons that you've learned and, the mistakes that you felt like you made, which we all do. What was kind of your, not only experience, but how did you grow and learn and overcome that? And who did you lean on? What were some of the things in particular that you felt like you were able to take from that?
Yeah. So I think I told you, earlier that college was, one of the most, transformational points in my life. I think that probably the second part was after I got fired at UAB and COVID. And I think, there's a world of emotions that you go through when you get fired as a coach, especially because of how public it is. And especially because during, as you mentioned, there was good and bads of this, but during a time when like essentially the world had shut down. And also, yeah, it just being, kind of so unexpected. And as you mentioned, it was the first time really in my career, professional career, where I'd really faced like adversity. I had just been such a linear rise to success, you know what I mean, within the coaching industry, and had just good lucky break after lucky break, if you will. So yeah, it was, I think the first couple months were really hard, and I was still in coaching mode, meaning like I was. Thank God this didn't happen, but I chased a couple assistant coaching jobs really hard. That looking back would have been horrible things if I would have got them, just on how it panned out. Chased a couple head coaching jobs. Almost got a head coaching job right after I got fired at UAB. 3 weeks later, I was a finalist for a job that I almost got, which I would have probably taken, but honestly, looking back, man, just such a blessing it didn't happen. And then I got a chance, after all that calmed down, I got a chance, really for about a year to be with my family, really reflect about my journey, who I was as a coach, what I wanted to prioritize in my life going forward, what I was passionate about. And I got to partake in some amazing kind of unique things, picked up some cool hobbies, joined like a leadership, learning leadership circle with Ryan Hawk, who's kind of like the famous podcast. It runs the Learning Leader. So I did one of his leadership circles for a year. I started a GA leadership academy for GAs around the country. I went to watch a bunch of practices, made a bunch of connections. My family and I went on some super cool vacations. Again, the world was shut down, so it made it a little bit easier, if you will, to kind of just be isolated with our family, and was really just, maybe more present than I ever had been for my family, during that time. Did such a better job of like physically taking care of myself ever since then. Started just, like a lot of people during COVID, working out more consistently, which I'd really let linger. Yeah, learning, doing some journaling and some reading, and it was just it was an amazing point time in my life where I think it really looking back was a big positive.
That's one of the lessons that's very hard to learn for so many people, right? A lot of the difficult things, the things that we you know would define as things that we wish we could control, that don't go as we expect, and how a lot of times it opens the door and leads us to places that are growth moments, right? And things that we look back on. It's really cool to hear you describe that. And one of those things was you had a brief stint where you were an analyst for Pac-12 games.
Yeah.
Did love it, hate it? Was it,
Yeah, it was again another cool experience. I liked it. I enjoyed it. It's and working for the Pac-12 network, and I did an in-studio show, and I did a couple games, and like bucket list kind of things, right? But like, you, Phil, too, probably remember when we were growing up, you had like that, remember ESPN and Sports Center was just coming popular. And remember that show that all those people would try out to be a Sports Center anchor, that reality show. And man, how cool that was if you could ever do that. Like I remember thinking of having all those thoughts as a kid, and to be able to experience that during COVID, but it's still nonetheless like worked 2 games, worked a studio show. That was a cool experience. Like that was another thing that I'll be able to say, like, yeah, I got to do something really cool that kind of always wanted to try when I was younger.
That's funny, and rest his soul, Bill Walton, one of the legends in the Pac-12 network, among many other career highlights and accolades. The double yes man himself. Did you ever interact with him during that brief stint with you guys?
Not during that. No, because it was COVID, and so I was watching a lot of games and studying. And it's so funny because everyone, like when I was getting advice, and I actually kind of hired a media consultant to help me a little bit in the beginning. And when I was getting advice, everyone's like, all right, don't watch Bill Walton because you can't be Bill Walton. You want to watch the other guys. Nobody can do what Bill Walton does. So I didn't during that time, but at Stanford the last couple of years, he did a handful of our games, and he just a remarkable person. And so I got to meet him there the last couple of years, and it's so amazing, kind of shocking. I didn't really realize Bill was sick. Like I didn't realize he was, I guess, close to dying. And because I feel like I saw him a couple months ago, doing a couple of our games, and said hi to him, and he knows everybody's name. It's one of his incredible life skills. Bill Walton knew everybody's name. Everybody in our program, I swear, he knew their name. And when he would see you at shoot around, he'd call you by your name. But it's so cool to see all the stories on social media of him and truly how many people his life affected. And I think, man, you talk about leaving a legacy, and as we like to say, like, be legendary. Bill Walton's the definition of it. I mean, it's just, you get on Twitter and to hear like random people who had these like amazing encounters with Bill Walton, just really, really cool.
Yeah, he's definitely a legend, and it's such an important part of the experience for college, and the idea of announcers and people that are memorable for kids, that sets the tone. I can remember seeing Dick Vitale at our shoot around when I was a freshman at Fresno State in Madison Square Garden, and to this day, like, being awestruck of just like, is this really happening right now? Is Dick Vitale talking to Coach Tarkanian while I'm out here shooting around about a game that I'm playing in Madison Square Garden, and literally just like, I'm in a dream. Like, this can't, those types of things. And Bill Walton, I never got to meet him. I got to watch his kids play a lot over at Jesuit in their tournaments, and I know he was there, but as iconic of an individual as there is, and his unique personality. Really cool about the names too. That is a skill. So then, that kind of touches on, you end up in the Pac-12. You move your family back to the West Coast, first time in a long time, and you just spent multiple years there, reconnecting with an old coach and an old teammate in Jesse Pruitt, mentioned before, and now that kind of is your last gig. So how did that kind of come to be? And also you can touch on your success in recruiting one of the local Sacramento products. Peja Stojakovic, legendary King. His son is a Stanford Cardinal, thanks to you. So what was that experience like?
Yeah, I think when I was out of coaching and then deciding the next hiring cycle, okay, hey, there's going to be some opportunities. For me, it was really about working for the right person. I think at my age and what I've gone through, being an assistant coach, it was all about who I worked for and my quality of life, and working for someone who respected me, but who would allow me to control my time to some degree, which is very rare, as assistant coach. And had a few opportunities at different schools, but to go back to work for Coach, who I've said this to everybody, and if anybody watched his press conference, his last press conference in Vegas after his last game against Washington State. I mean, he was the definition of servant leadership. And of the 360 plus Division I basketball coaches in the country, Jared Haas is number one in the country in terms of how he treats his staff, the freedom he gives his staff, the flexibility, and in terms of a person you would want to work for. And at my age, after being a head coach and having 3 kids and wanting to be a part of their lives, all those things were incredibly important to me. And have some history with Stanford. Obviously, it's in California, but my brother-in-law went there. My stepsister went to Stanford. Just knowing how highly regarded it is as an academic institution, all those things played, and it was a no-brainer for me to go back to California with my family, really for the first time. For the first time since I left in 2005 after Davis. And it was an awesome 3 years.
That brings us, to your current and future endeavor here as head coach at University of Illinois Chicago, the head coach of the Flame. You've touched on this already. Now, as you're loading up and kind of prepping for your next season, what would you say you're most looking forward to and most excited about as you kind of embark on your second opportunity as a head coach and entering into your soon to be third decade as a coach at the collegiate level?
Yeah, I think I'm most excited for the opportunity to take what I've learned as a head coach before and be a better version of myself. And hopefully that will lead to, much more success. I think that's the most exciting thing. A lot of times, in coaching, Phil, it's if you get fired, the pros is different than college, but a lot of times when you get fired, you don't get another opportunity. And I used to say this to people on every Zoom I spoke to on in the last few years. If everybody could get fired from their job, take a year off, get some, quality time with your family, read, reflect, think, take care of your health, and come back and do the same job or something similar, the world would be such a better place. Everyone would be so better. And it doesn't really happen. And even prior to this opportunity, for me, I was comfortably living with the fact that it might never happen again, right? At least at the collegiate level, at this level. And so I think the most thing I'm excited for is that opportunity again to take what I've learned, be the best version of myself, impact young people, have my family enjoy this experience together, and see what happens. No matter how hard you try, you can't guarantee how the ball's going to bounce at the end of the game, And so I think the excitement and the challenge of putting guys, helping young men and staff be the best version of themselves and putting them in the best position to succeed and seeing what happens is exciting.
Well, I know I am, as a friend and a fan, super excited for you, and know you'll have not only a great amount of success, but probably even more importantly than anything else, a huge impact on all those athletes that you touch, and would be right up there with Coach Haas in terms of how you treat your staff and assistants. And we're super proud of you, man, and I really want to thank you. We're up on our time here. I know you've got meetings to go to, and so I appreciate you taking the time to sit and share your story and reconnect. And there's so much more to cover. Hopefully we'll get to do a round 2 here and go into some more stuff. But thank you so much for taking your precious minutes and hours here, and all the wisdom in the story. We're very grateful, man.
Awesome. Thank you, Phil. Appreciate it.